Our next presentation is courtesy of Bart Wauterickx, CEO of the Sniffers in Belgium. In this role, Bart advises and supports oil and gas companies around the world how to reduce their emissions and improve their asset integrity. With a recent focus on the reduction of methane emissions, the Sniffers contributes to limiting global warming. Before joining the Sniffers in 2015, Bart was Vice President Operations at Atlas Copco Compressors and Operations Director EMEA at Brady Industrial Identification. Bart holds a Master in Mechanical Engineering from the University of Leuven in Belgium and a Bachelor of Business Administration from the University of Louvain-la-Neuve, Belgium. Welcome, Bart. Could you please talk us through your step-by-step guide to methane emission quantification?
Hi, Danny. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here. And indeed, a fantastic subject for this webinar. And I'd like to contribute here and talking about methane emission quantification, with the purpose, of course, to reduce those emissions. I'm Bart Wauterickx. I'm the head of the Sniffers. And for people that don't know the Sniffers, I just wanted to say a couple of few words. The Sniffers is an international service provider based out of Belgium, but active all over the world. And we are concentrating on two main service ranges to the oil and gas sector: emission reduction management surveys, as well as pipeline integrity services, both with surveys with boots on the ground, as well as lots of advice to our customers. We are already on the market for the past 30 years, and we have executed more than 9,000 different emission reduction projects over the world. I like to talk about methane emission quantification, and the topic is extremely hot on the table for pipeline operators, as there is a new initiative on the market which is called Oil and Gas Methane Partnership 2.0. This is an initiative that started in 2015, was led by the United Nations Environmental Programme, European Commission, as well as EDF. It started in 2015, and in 2020, they came out with the version 2.2, with the ambition to increase the credibility of the industry and to create transparency on the performance of the industry towards methane emissions and reduction of methane emissions. Today, there are 72 companies around the world, but especially from Europe, that are a member of this organization, and many of those companies are listening in this webinar. This OGMP 2.0 framework defines how methane emissions have to be measured and how they are reported. And because it's so hot on the table, I will also use this framework as a red wire through my presentation. Also important here is that the European Commission announced to come up with some new legislation as part of their Green Deal when it comes to emission reporting, measurement and reporting. A legislation that will come out in November 2021, and it will be based on the OGMP framework. A couple of particular topics concerning this framework. It will include the complete gas value chain from well up to market. It will include reporting of the performance of joint ventures, and looking to the European Commission, it will also affect not only producers within Europe, but also affect people that are importing gas from outside Europe. What does it mean, reporting against OGMP 2.0? In this document, in this partnership, 5 levels of reporting were defined. And I would like to stick to level 3, 4, and 5. This is not a master class in OGMP, so let me shortly explain what level 3 means. A pipeline operator has a full understanding of its inventory of assets, all the devices, all the components, and the pipeline operator uses generic emission factors to calculate the total emission of that asset. When one wants to reach level 4, then the operator talks about has a complete inventory, of course, at hand, but for each of the sources and devices available, he will have some direct measurements or determine some specific emission factors rather than taking some factors out of literature. Level 5, that is a completely other approach. It is, of course, the aggregation of all the detailed emissions from level 4, but at the same time also a top-down measurement is organized based on some aerial or some vehicle-based measurements, and that measurement is then compared with the purpose to reconcile the figures to understand what potential differences are. The partnership also defines a gold standard, and that is for pipeline operators that want to reach within 3 years level 4-5. They will get the gold standard, and we see already that is an aim for a lot of those members, those 72 members of the partnership. For the mid and downstream, where the pipeline owners are positioned, we see 3 different source types that have to be reported: fugitive emissions, venting emissions, and incomplete combustion. So in a lot of cases, this means focusing on fugitive emissions and vents. This is necessary. This kind of detailed reporting is necessary to have a reporting on level 3, 4, and ultimately also on level 5. Different reporting standards exist for TSOs or for a DSO. Different reporting standards exist that take into account those specific emissions from fugitives and venting, like I just explained. How does one start with this? Well, it's important to have a very detailed and complete inventory, an inventory of all the potential emitting sources, of all the components, of all the devices. And as a second step, emission factors, emissions have to be measured for each of those components. Sometimes, and in a lot of cases, of course, no emissions, but the ones where emissions are happening, a measurement needs to take place, a direct or an indirect measurement, so that a calculation can be done in order to express that emission in kilograms per year. For fugitive emissions, one talks about LDAR surveys, leak detection and repair. For vents, a popular method is high flow sampling or bagging. With all those emission factors and that inventory, we combine that with the activity factors, the hours that an asset was in production, or the number of strokes for a gas-driven valve, and all that data leads then to a compliant report. With that stream of activities, level 4 reporting can be reached. What kind of measuring techniques are popular? And you see a couple of illustrations on this slide. And I start at the top left, where you see a remote laser detection. Remote laser detection that gives values in ppm meters, and with some modeling can lead to a quantification of that leak. A second instrument is the popular optical gas imaging camera that can visualize a methane leak. It's not so sensitive, but definitely can identify leaks above 10,000 ppm. And with some leak, no leak parameters and correlation, one can also quantify a total emission. The third one is the very sensitive sniffing device based on PID or FID technology. Very sensitive. Leaks as from 1 ppm are detected, and based on a very popular EPA Method 21 protocol, one can calculate the mass emissions for that particular source and for the installation. At the right top, you see the high flow sampling or bagging method. This is a direct measurement, so it's not working with correlation like the previous one. It's a direct measuring method that, based on the volume that is pulled through the bag, based on the ppm value that is measured in the outflow and the temperature and some other parameters, one can calculate very accurately the emission from that source. At the bottom left, you see a ultrasonic measurement of a defective valve that leaks into the vent. This dBA value with some modeling can also lead to a quantification. At the bottom in the middle, you see a suction carpet and you see suction nozzles in front of a car. These techniques can be used for potential leaks in underground pipelines and can also lead to quantification. A few words more about the quantification of vents, where you see a couple of pictures here as an illustration that a valve, a gas-driven valve or a regulator can be backed. And with this technique, very accurate emission can be calculated, and this is the emission factor that is necessary for this OGMP reporting for vents. The same technique is used for a small vent. Again, here the bag is pulled over the vent outlet, and the technique measures pretty accurately the total emission coming out of this particular vent. All that data is not a small Excel list. This is an enormous amount of data that comes out of these surveys with fugitive emissions and all the data coming for venting emissions. All that data needs to be gathered, validated, managed and calculated in a proper emission management program. A program that can take care of the detailed inventory for fugitives, for venting, for combustion, that can take care of the different calculations and the agreed protocols with the client, the agreed protocols, whether this is, as an example, leak, no leak, whether this is a EPA method 21, whether this is a own developed method. All those calculations have to be done in an accurate and transparent way. And all that data finally leads to a report with all the data, the details that are required for that level 4 OGMP reporting. The companies that want to reach a gold standard need to have a plan for not only level 4, but also level 5. And level 5 is a site measurement, that can be done with an aerial way or with the vehicle driving around the asset and try to understand the total emissions from that site. And with that data and then the modeling, the next column in the OGMP reporting can be filled in. We see two techniques very popular over here. First of all, on the top line, you see a drone equipped with some very sensitive equipment that can measure methane on a ppb level. And with those measurements and the coordinate of the drone at that particular measurement place, one can calculate the total flux of methane coming from that site. Or it is also possible to make a heat map so that the biggest level or the highest level of emission can be determined in order to find back the particular source. Both methods will require some modeling, and some models are pretty accurate, some models are less accurate in order to come to a total figure for the site. This is, of course, a one-time measurement. At the bottom, you see a couple of examples of remote sensors based on an IoT technology that could be around an asset 24/7 and have a continuous measurement of the emissions coming from that asset. These sensors are dedicated to methane. There are no interferences with other chemicals. It's pretty easy to roll out this sensor network in an asset. And it creates alerts when there are high emissions or an increased level of emission. And also here, modeling can help to quantify what comes out. And all those figures that lead to a level 5 OGMP report, so that a company that has subscribed to the OGMP partnership with all those measurements can reach that gold standard. As a last slide, 72 companies are member of OGMP and they will report in one way or another, level 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We see a lot of ambition in the industry, and we see also a lot of questions in the industry. And our suggestion and our advice to companies is, first of all, to have a good understanding of what is the current situation, how good is the inventory existing, is it complete, are there gaps, what are already, have there already been a lot of measurements, are LDAR campaigns already in place? When there is a good understanding, then top management of the company should set some ambition. Is the ambition to reach level 3? Is it the ambition to reach the gold standard? And if that ambition is set, then a program can be created and detailed surveys can be rolled out for the next 3 years that can be executed and will lead to an OGMP report. It needs to be said that measurement and reporting, this is not the final ambition of the whole initiative. There's also something like a target that is coming from the MMI, the Methane Initiative, the Mineral Methane Initiative, where reductions per year are projected. So the purpose, of course, of measuring and reporting is also to have a clear understanding of where are the biggest emissions, what are the high priority maintenance or engineering activities that could lead to a strong reduction of emissions. With that, I would like to conclude this presentation, Danny, and hand it over to you for any question.
Thank you very much, Bart. Great presentation. You know, I think carbon dioxide gets a lot of attention in the press as being the worst polluter, but I guess the chemists among us know that methane has 25 times the greenhouse gas potential of CO2.
25 times, Danny, only when you take a look at the 100 years. And one talks about 86 times more potent in a 20 years time frame. And looking to the ambition of whether this is the European Union or some countries or some other places in the world, we only have a couple of 10 years available, 2030, 2040, 50. So we better focus on the big figure. It's 86 times more dangerous than CO2. It is the fastest way to reduce the global warming and to make a chance to keep our global warming under a 1.5 degrees scenario.
Quite right, quite right. And it's great to see the oil companies coming out now and making their commitments over the next few years about how much they intend to reduce their methane emissions by.
Indeed, yeah.
I had a question from Ari Dam come in. You know, perhaps not the same greenhouse gas potential, but while we're talking about converting gas pipelines over to hydrogen, are these equipment and tech methods applicable also to look for hydrogen leaks?
When they are, of course, combined, then of course you can concentrate on methane, and then you directly identify the leaks. And with the stream information, the combination, you can calculate also how much hydrogen is leaking. When you have 100% hydrogen leaks, there are equipments available. And there are customers already that have 100%, that have several 100 kilometers of lines of hydrogen that we already measured for them. So definitely it is available. Correct. Yeah.
Great. And what is the first experience of a pipeline operator when they start to measure their emissions?
Yeah, good question. Up to now, we've seen that a lot of pipeline owners have an understanding of their emissions based on modeling. Modeling based on some generic figure. And when they start measuring, first of all the fugitive emissions, all the venting, the best operators, they are getting a confirmation that the actual figures are rather close to their modeling, but not everyone is at that stage. And pipeline owners that start exploring this area, they are in a lot of cases surprised that so much methane emissions are happening in their facilities. But at the same time, and it's an opportunity to reduce this quickly, because if you see a lot of emissions, there are a lot of opportunities, and basically the Pareto is also working there. There will be 20% of the leagues that will produce 80% of the emissions. So for them, it is a opportunity to pretty fast reduce emissions.
Sounds like a good wake-up call.
Yeah, indeed, yeah. We look forward that a lot of pipeline owners really take this serious. Like I mentioned, it's not only OGMP, it's also the European Commission for the European players and for the people that export gas into Europe. That European legislation will play an important role. Up to now, it's of course unknown what the details will be. The commissioner has will decide what that will be, but we are looking forward to see that legislation and then have some strong improvements in the industry on reducing on emissions, on methane emissions.
Great. Well, Bart, thank you again for the great presentation.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you. Have a further nice webinar. Thank you. Goodbye.